that's when the news was telling us, get to a safe place if you are in Oak Grove.
A tornado warning coming into Jefferson County. Again, Birmingham, Alliance, Oak Grove, that western and northwestern part of the county up toward the river.
Has already been searched.
And since we've had reports of damage at Oak Grove High School, Lock 17 out in this area, that means this thing is on the ground.
Dorothy, it's going to hurt. Here we go.
That is a very devastating looking tornado.
Then I saw movement with my peripheral vision to the right, and I noticed the door was moving, the carpet on the floor was moving, and at that point I realized I was in trouble.
And we got in the corner of the basement that we thought would be safe, and that was the only one that was still standing, thank God.
Don't wait for another one to happen. Get ready for it, because good Lord may put another one on you.
Good evening, I'm James Spann. 20 years ago, the people of Jefferson County experienced an F5 tornado with winds in excess of 200 miles per hour. The storm leveled entire neighborhoods. It took 32 lives and forever changed many others. The first community to be hit by the half-mile-wide storm was this one, Oak Grove in western Jefferson County, ground zero for the twisted fury of April 8, 1998.
April often brings the most volatile atmospheric conditions we see all year.
So let's go back to storm alert quickly if we can. We have new warnings coming out, and let's see what the new warnings are here. Actually, we have so many, it's hard to determine that.
This was never more true than on April 8, 1998.
I can't tell you enough to take this thing seriously. There you go. There's the hook. I mean, this is just classic, and this could be a large tornado.
And then,
being dark, you won't see much unless lightning illuminates the storm. And as it approaches that site, yeah, we had a power failure. Did you guys see that? Look at the lights down there go off. That looks like a massive power failure over the western section of Birmingham. That's not an illusion. That power outage, that moment, we knew something bad was happening under the cover of darkness. It wasn't until the first light of day we saw how bad the damage was. Airlink 3340 captured aerial images of the mangled wreckage of what was formerly Oak Grove High School. A group of cheerleaders was inside the gym when the tornado destroyed the building. Miraculously, they all survived. Meteorologist Megan Thomas caught up with Vicki Higgins 20 years after she survived this tornado.
The only thing that protected us was God. I mean, that's just, there's no other way you can look at that.
April 8th, 1998 is the day Vicki Higgins will never forget.
It's been 20 years, but I can still go back to sights and sounds and even smells from that day.
At the time, the 8th grade cheerleader stayed after school for practice, never imagining what was about to happen.
We were having a normal cheer practice. We were getting towards the end of practice, and the lights, all the lights went out. The 5 cheerleaders that were still there got to about the middle of the gym, and the tornado siren started going off again, and I guess we only assume it was the suction from the tornado, slammed the door shut to the lobby. We just dropped right to the middle of the gym and held hands.
She briefly opened her eyes to see the sky exploding above her.
And the next time I opened my eyes, that's when I remember there being the rafters that were in the ceiling of the gym, literally 6 inches away. We got up and we looked around, and the entire gym was completely down.
Vicki and 4 others walked away with only scrapes and bruises. Many say that's nothing short of a miracle. Now, the mother of 2 says she knows firsthand how important it is to be prepared for severe weather.
People probably thought I was obsessive, but since I've had kids, like, we have helmets, we have a safe place in our house, we have a box ready at all times.
This is Oak Grove Memorial Park, where the school and the gym once stood. Up until that April night, it had been 21 years since an F5 tornado had moved through Jefferson County. Recently, Brian Peters revisited Memorial Park. In 1998, Brian worked for the National Weather Service. He was the meteorologist who issued the tornado warning for this storm and rated the tornado an F5. Really nice tornado signature here.
Well, we had issued warnings for what was an EF2 tornado that came from Pickens into western Tuscaloosa counties. Reports were slow to come in, and we're watching the storm trying to hold off on the issuance of a warning because we're not getting any reports. And then it was like somebody opened the floodgates.
Data, that's a strong indication of a tornado. There's the Warrior River.
And at that point we realized Jefferson County was in deep trouble.
To this day, I drive past this site, and I still can't believe this school is gone.
That school was amazing because it took a direct hit. Probably was not an F5 intensity at this particular point, but it was soon to become an F5, just a little bit to the northeast of here.
You know, I think the one thing I'll never forget, that we flew the helicopter the next morning, early, and I knew that it was bad out here, but nobody knew how bad it was until the first light of day. And so I told the pilot, let's go to the school. Let's go to Oak Grove School. I know that place like the back of my hand. I can look at that and kind of tell how bad it was. Mm-hmm. We flew over this place, and when the world saw that, when we saw that, we knew this is horrific. And from here, as you say, Brian, it just got worse. The intensity actually increased as it moved northeast of here.
Trees that were debarked by debris. And on the Fujita scale, that was one of the first indicators that this was most likely going to be at least an EF4 or EF5. And then well-built homes that were essentially wiped off their foundations. You know, you talk about flying over it, and of course I was allowed to go with the state police to basically map out the damage path. And I remember the pilot giving me the latitude, longitude when we were over Pratt City of the endpoints. And I looked up and my heart skipped a beat because directly ahead of us, the next stop for that tornado was the Birmingham International Airport.
Before reaching Pratt City, the tornado roared through the community of Rock Creek, producing F5 damage right here. You can still drive down Warrior River Road today and see scars of the storm, like these front steps that lead nowhere. Living through a storm of this strength is one thing, but being lofted into it and living to tell the story is extremely rare. It happened to Matthew Seals. He survived, but his young son did not. He takes Christopher Sine through that night and shares some lessons we can all learn from him.
I could hear this thing coming. I heard the transformer outside explode and the lights went out.
Why do you think you survived? What have you learned?
I'm here and I survived it by God's grace. It was a Wednesday. I had worked late that day. I came home and we decided not to go to church that night, which was probably a bad decision, but Christy wasn't feeling well, my wife. So we were staying home and the weather got bad and we was watching the news and James was talking about the possibility that they'd given a tornado warning. And he said there's a possible tornado in my area down in Rock Creek. 3 of my children were home at the time, so it was me, Christy, Nathan, John Michael, and Margaret, and got in the small closet in the middle bedroom. But we had a small house, we didn't have a basement, we didn't put helmets on, but in a matter of probably 10 seconds, I felt the floor literally buckle, like it was buckling out from under me, and I look up and the roof blows off, and then I was knocked unconscious. The next thing I remember is waking up. We were laying out in the woods. I didn't realize I was paralyzed. I just felt like something was lying on me. Nathan was 8 and John Michael was almost 3. Margaret was still a baby. She was a year old. But Nathan was lying there and they came and got us and they carried me out on a door and carried...
4 hours later.
It was about 4 hours, that's right. A couple days later is when they actually told me the truth about Nathan and his severe head injury. You know, I'd made my case with God, and he decided to take Nathan home. So, you know, if Nathan had had a helmet on, there's a possibility he could have lived. Why I would survive and Nathan didn't is a question I'll ask God when I see him.
Matthew says learn from his loss, have a plan, and make a helmet part of it. How often do you go back to that area?
Not very often. I will on occasion.
Nathan Seals and 10 others lost their lives here in Rock Creek, April 8, 1998. Ahead, as we continue along the path of the storm,
the faith of God that brought me through.
Miraculous stories of survival of those caught in the path of a deadly tornado. As the F5 tornado continued through Jefferson County, Edgewater and McDonald Chapel took a direct hit. Neighborhoods were so ripped apart, people who had lived there all their lives could not find their way. For several days, ABC 3340's Pam Huff stayed in the area, telling stories of those people who lost everything and their fighting spirit. Recently, she went back into these communities to find out how they're faring 20 years after that life-altering night.
I couldn't believe it, you know. The house was cracking and everything, and I thought just the wind was blowing. Then I felt water coming on me, and I thought maybe, I said, well, the roof leaking. Then I looked up in the air, and it was just clear with nothing there. It took the whole top of the house off.
There was an odor in the air like sulfur. There was a change to the atmosphere, like a green tint to everything. And then the sky began to take on a copper look. The hail was just unbelievable, beating down on the roof. It sounded like galloping horses, actually. And then suddenly that was gone. I mean, for a brief instant, it was total silence.
Then hell broke loose.
I noticed the door was moving, the carpet on the floor was moving, and at that point I realized I was in trouble.
Morris Rembert in McDonald Chapel and Beverly George, a couple of miles away in Edgewater, described that night 20 years ago like it was yesterday. It is forever etched in their memories. Rembert and George lost all their possessions that night. There was no other option than to start over.
It was a slow process, you know, and mostly it was just empty spaces around here, you know. Then gradually people start building, you know.
For Rembert, however, the close-knit community he once knew no longer exists.
Mostly you knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody looked out for everybody's kids or whatever. But now, you know, half the people, you don't know them. They just here. You don't know anybody.
In Edgewater, however, George describes a different scenario.
The neighborhood actually did help. You know, even people I wasn't that close to were coming to see what could they do, how could they help.
Children, of course, are the lifeblood of any community. And here in the Edgewater community, since the storm, the Neighborhood Association has done its very best to provide for its children with playgrounds like this one. In McDonald Chapel, Morris Rembert says even though life is not the way it used to be.
To me, it always felt like home.
Did it really?
It's just different. But I say, you know, it'll come back. Just like the season, it'll come back.
And Beverly George still loves her community's spirit.
I think the focus of this neighborhood was to not allow the positive things of the neighborhood to die along with some of the precious people who died in the neighborhood.
As the storm moved through Edgewater and McDonald Chapel, 71 people were here at the Open Door Church attending Wednesday evening worship services. All 71 survived. Brenda LeDunn spoke with the pastor and some of the church members, and they say that was nothing short of a miracle.
And you get a shower, you realize the things have actually gone through your clothes. Your clothes look fine, but the little fibers have actually gone through and made places all over your body.
Those were the physical marks left behind from the April 8th tornado at Open Door Church in West Jefferson County. But it's the spiritual impressions from the storm Pastor Rick and other church members will carry a lifetime.
We crawled through a window and we came through the front. We were in the hallway singing and praying.
My thought process was, we'll be okay. I mean, this is Alabama. We always have tornado warnings sometimes, but we'll be okay. And so I went back to teaching, and when I did, I just heard that still small voice on the inside saying, you're the shepherd, you're supposed to take care of the sheep. Well, it was less than 2 minutes the tornado hit, and the building was gone.
Twins Amber and Ashley Jones were 12 years old, crouching in the hallway of the church when the tornado hit.
There was just a moment during that the best way to describe it was that I just was not surrounded by that chaos anymore. Just had a peace in the midst of all that. I mean, we were screaming prayers before and during, and then I just kind of entered into just this experience of peace. And I never saw like the vision of an angel that we pick out, but there was just this white glow. And in calm voices, I could just hear, help, we need more help. But it wasn't the prayers and screaming of everybody around me, because you know, we had all started doing that, and I knew what that sounded like. But this was different, and it was in unison, and it was peaceful. Just help, we need more help, kind of thing. And it was very bright, but my eyes were closed. It was pitch black in the church.
The twins say they got confirmation from the former children's minister. Angels were in the church that night.
There were demons trying to push, you know, the wall in. It was a 4-ton wall. There was a battle going on. And angels were crying out for help to hold this slab, or these slabs, off of us as, church members in that hallway. So it brought it all together. Mom knew immediately this is a miracle.
The biggest miracle that night, not one person died in the church. The building was destroyed, but the church, the people, withstood the storm.
And I always felt like there was a purpose, for our life and everything. And I know I was meant to tell that story, and here I am 20 years later still telling it.
In the years since the storm, both sisters say they are compelled to encourage others by sharing the lessons of faith they learned that night. The tornado continued on its path of twisted fury, ending here in Pratt City. The next day, chief photographer Bill Castle found a man, a survivor, determined not to lose heart. 20 years later, we found him again in the same place. Sarah Snyder shares his story.
A little hard work is almost always rewarding when you're doing it in a place you love. Which is why James Carter, a retired construction worker, still likes to get his hands dirty. It's this house, this street, these neighbors who keep coming back, even after surviving 4 devastating storms.
I can't.
But talking about April 8th, 1998, the storm that took his home and nearly his life, is still painful for James Carter. Our chief photographer, Bill Castle, first found James that day in 1998, just hours after he lost it all.
And I quickly ran in the bathtub, and that's when the lights went out, and a lot of debris started hitting the house. And when it started hitting the house, that's when I know the roof was coming on me. Most of the roof in the front part of the house was torn off. And I can remember some of the things. The house next door was damaged, and one across the street just demolished, and one lady was in the house and we didn't know it. We finally got her house, and everybody in the debris was all upside the road. We couldn't tell nothing.
Today, his house is whole again.
He kept me. I mean, way back, teenagers, he kept me. And I'm on my knees every morning 3 or 4 times.
But he says it's those same memories that evoke a heart of gratitude.
Oh, Lord, how blessed. I can't tell you how blessed I am. You just can't do it. It was the grace of God that kept us here.
Even today, the question still, why?
It was a frightening thing after I realized what had happened. And I was just thankful. All the while I was doing it and the help I had, it was frightening how powerful, how I was left out of so many people was destroyed. It was you can't destroy no. It took me a long time, many years to get over that. Wonder why God left me.
With a faith as solid as concrete.
Faith wasn't the only thing solidified that April night 20 years ago.
It took a long time before any warning. I wasn't just on pins and needles.
Coming up next, the lessons learned in the coming days, months, and years after the storm. From Pratt City to Oak Grove, you've seen the destruction and the devastation. Now, 20 years later, Wendell Edwards looks at the 3 lessons learned from the storm and how these communities keep moving forward.
Take a look almost anywhere in Oak Grove. Just try to find the path of that deadly tornado. Today, you would be hard-pressed to see any evidence of what happened here 20 years ago.
Can you believe it's been 20 years?
No, I can't. It amazes me how fast time flies.
But those who were here then, those still here now, neighbors and friends who lived through it all, remember it vividly. It is a moment in time not easily forgotten.
We were in my basement. I had gotten my parents to my house, and my kids, my husband, we were all in my basement.
Are we graphing that one?
Algebra teacher Lisa Glaze had just left the high school before the storm hit. The biggest lesson she learned came in the day following that tornado.
The community, the stores, everybody was on the road. We had signs, they had little flags, and it was just, even now, I teared up talking about it.
How a community staring at overwhelming destruction came together in a time of desperate need.
We rely on each other, we depend on each other, and it's just a very close-knit community.
It was that unity that led to even more change. Safety became top of mind, a lesson born out of necessity.
We've added shelters inside our fire stations because we lost 2 of our 3 fire stations.
Concord Fire Chief Eric Prater also gave us a tour of the new public storm shelter.
Now we have this community shelter here for the area of Oak Grove, and we've got one being built up in the Concord area as well.
This shelter holds about 70 people, and anytime a tornado warning is issued, the shelter will be open. 20 years later, it is a community that understands all too well what it's like to go through a natural disaster, and that it very well may happen again. James Oliver Evans says he'll be ready for next time.
It's my safety shelter.
Okay.
Just in case you have another L5 where you'd like to have a place. My wife said, you either build me one or we don't go back out there.
He rebuilt his house in Sylvan Springs almost in the very same spot, with that storm shelter only a few feet away. So I guess you would say you learned your lesson?
Most people that are in a L5 do. You don't have to have a second lesson. The first one's enough.
Evans says his shelter holds about 12 people, enough for his family, his friends, even some of his neighbors. Like Dan Hornbuckle, who lives next door.
We just heard a lot of roaring coming up. We thought it was just a regular storm.
His biggest lesson learned, always be weather aware.
It took a long time before any warning. I wasn't just on pins and needles, just looking over my shoulder and just couldn't sleep and just worried about it.
Now he says he knows and is better prepared, as this entire area is now. An area that saw the worst that could happen, now clinging to lessons of life, born out of survival.
No survivor of that fateful night is willing to forget the 32 lives lost. This special is dedicated to their honor.